Finally finished, Roy closed the book in his hand, then blew out the oil lamp and stretched greatly. The silver-white brilliance outside the window poured down, reflecting the light Madara on the clean ground. He smiled, just about to take a break. According to the daily tasks of the system, he has 6 hours of sleep time, and then at 4 o'clock in the morning, he has to get up from the warm bed to practice. Although this kind of life is very tiring, before not knowing it, Roy actually feels that he has gradually become accustomed to this kind of work and rest. Just when he was about to get into the bed to sleep. Tuck tuck tuck, a soft knock on the door came from outside the dormitory, slightly interrupting Roy's sleepiness. It's so late, who is preventing me from sleeping somehow? Roy sighed helplessly and asked. Who is it? He is not afraid of any uninvited guests. After all, this is the most heavily guarded military academy in naval headquarters, and he is not afraid of anyone making trouble. There was a moment of silence outside the door, and then a familiar female voice sounded. Roy, it's me. Hina, that chick. Why do you come to the dormitory to find yourself in the middle of the night? Did it come to me to settle the accounts? This is too stingy. Classmate Hina, I'm already asleep, it's not very convenient now, see you in class tomorrow. Roy decided not to pick up the stubble. The demo still wants to settle accounts with me, that's impossible, okay. I'm really too smart. Hina's deliberately low voice came from outside the door. Roy, I'm not here to trouble you. When Roy heard this, he flipped a Byakugan, who would believe you? This is in the middle of the night, when the night is quiet, the moon is dark and the wind is high, isn't it a good time to kill and set fire? Lousy doesn't have any friendship with you. I can't think of anything other than trouble me. Thank you then, but it's really inconvenient now. I'm already asleep. I'll talk about something after class tomorrow, classmate Hina. Roy still speaks plainly. Outside. Wearing a military uniform to highlight her attractive figure, Hina's face was red and white, and she was very angry. Roy bastard. Obviously, I was afraid that I would beat him. What to sleep? How can anyone sleep so early? After experiencing the thrilling scene of the bomb on the school field in the afternoon, Hina's anger towards Roy has long since vanished. Seeing Roy even risking her life in order to save other classmates, she knew that she was really wrong to blame him. How could such a person be an arrogant, proud and despising bastard? Think about it this way, Hina felt a little guilty for Roy in her heart. So after the training was over, she thought about going to the door to apologize to Roy and contact her feelings. What I didn't expect was, this bastard wouldn't even let himself in. This is too bullying. I already said, I'm not here to trouble you. Well, the more I think about it, the more angry. Hina's chest is filled with anger and fluctuates. You open the door for me, Roy, she yelled towards the bedroom door. Bedroom. Roy was moved by Hina's indomitable spirit, but he just wanted to sleep well now. Doesn't this little girl know that I will get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to train? If you don't sleep enough and don't have enough energy, it is estimated that you will be struck by the system again. I won't drive. I have taken off my clothes and went to bed. You go back. Roy became more and more anxious as he thought about it, and went back in shock. But he hasn't finished speaking yet, boom. The door of the bedroom was knocked open. Hina walked in angrily with 2 black iron fences in her hands. Then, a scream sounded. Why don't you wear clothes? Hina was crying anxiously, her cold pretty face flushed, and she hurriedly turned her head away. The little eyes kept peeking at Roy's body from time to time. Well, I didn't expect this guy to have a pretty good figure. Although the water chestnut muscles are not exaggerated, they are full of explosive power. The square-shaped pectoralis major and gully eye-catching abdominal muscles make the mouth dry. And the broad latissimus dorsi makes his whole person present an inverted triangle shape. With the sharp lines, slender figure, and Roy's handsome face, it is like a girl killer. Well, people in this world are relatively precocious. Roy talked helplessly, then put on a military uniform to cover his body, looked at the dilapidated gate, and said speechlessly. I said classmate Hina, I said I was going to sleep. Nude sleeping is good for body and mind, don't you know? Also. You cover your eyes with your hands, but your fingers are showing gaps. What the hell is the operation? What? After Roy spoke out, Hina let out a shy scream again, her face was stained with a beautiful blush, and she quickly closed her eyes. Roy smiled secretly. Unexpectedly, when Hina was young, she was also a shy girl. But it's normal to think about it, this is only 13 or 14 years old, even if it is to train the little queen, it will take some time to grow up. But, looking at Hina's handheld black fence and the iron door behind her with a terrifying arc, I always feel that this girl is going to come to the door to fight for herself. Roy shook his head, putting on his military uniform carefully, buttoning up one button after another. His expression was extremely serious, as if he was dealing with a very sacred thing. Hina in front of her saw her eyes twinkling. It is said that serious men are the most handsome, especially after seeing Roy's body full of visual impact just now. Hina can't forget it at all. And now, seeing Roy meticulously buttoning the buttons of the military uniform in front of her, an unknown complex sentiment arose in her heart. It's not that I like it, I can only say that it is a kind of good feeling. A man who is always serious about doing things always has a unique charm. But what she didn't know was, this is all forced by the system. He also doesn't want to sleep naked, he used to wear clothes crookedly, how comfortable he was. But now, it's as clean as an obsessive-compulsive Virgo. It's just a bit of tears. Let's talk about it, Hina, if it's a fight, I'll forget it, and I'll just surrender. Roy said slowly after putting on his clothes. His hands were half lifted in the air, making a gesture of surrender. Not an enemy of life or death, he didn't bother to be true to this chick. The most important is, this is a demon fruit power, at least at this stage, demon fruit power has an overwhelming advantage over ordinary people. Hina coughed softly, hiding her inner Shao Juju, and said seriously. Roy, I'm here this time because I want you to do me a favor. Her voice hasn't completely fallen off yet. Roy directly waved her hand to interrupt her. No time. Hina was immediately stunned. Is this man so straightforward? She gritted her silver teeth. But you don't know what I asked you to help. Everything is the same, no time. Roy interrupted again. Hina was about to cry in her heart. Who are these people? Can't you let me finish talking? I don't know how many people in the military academy want to help themselves, so as to make a good impression. But you guy, refused without saying anything? Roy sighed helplessly as he looked at Hina's suffocated and flushed face in front of him. It's not that he doesn't want to help, but he is really out of time. In addition to the required courses in military academies, his spare time was fully arranged by the system. Self-study cultural classes, extracurricular exercises, and all kinds of mess. On the surface, it has nothing to do with self-discipline, half a dime. He couldn't even spare half an hour. Besides, if you have that time, why would Roy help you? Is it not good to spend that time to bubble girls? But this is just a beautiful dream. Self-disciplined men don't need women. Roy can only comfort himself like this in his heart. Hina stared blankly at Roy's steadfast look of swearing to the death, suddenly gritted her teeth tightly. A touch of determination appeared in her beautiful eyes, and then took out a crumpled piece of paper from Kabuto. Lowered his head and handed it to Roy. Roy frowned. What is this? However, he found Hina's hand holding the paper, which was a little trembling. He squinted his eyes subconsciously and took a close look at Hina. What is this? Hina's eyelids twitched, her head pressed very low, almost buried in her chest. This is the test paper for the cultural course. Her voice is the same as that of a mosquito. Roy blinked and took the answer sheet. Then, ha 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 ha. The hearty laughter resounded throughout the bedroom. Dare you laugh? Hina raised her head suddenly, staring murderously at Roy, who was laughing forward and backward, and said angrily. Roy felt the cold killing intent in the steel rod in Hina's hand, and immediately stopped the smile. Well, classmate Hina, I am a professionally trained soldier with strict self-discipline. Under normal circumstances, you won't laugh at others, you can rest assured. But his slightly trembling shoulders and his tight face directly betrayed his inner mood. You bastard. Hina gritted her teeth and spoke authentically. Roy held back his smile, couldn't help but look down at the test paper again. Immediately after, ha 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 ha. Forget it, I still can't help it, ha 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 ha. Because the above is a blank space, there is only one bright red 0 egg. 0 points. Ha ha ha. Hina, this little girl, can't write a word. Why are you fat? Little brother, I can't write a single word. Anyway, you give her a whole sentence, and Vice Admiral does not expect to give you nothing. Roy was suffocating a smile almost all his life, and even couldn't help covering his forehead with his hand. This bright red, naked and dazzling 0 score is almost impossible to look directly at. Sure enough, are beautiful girls all scumbags? Such a thought came to him involuntarily, and his eyes gradually turned to Hina, who was shy and angry in front of him. Ahem, that, classmate Hina, why don't you write a word on that? Roy felt that Hina was on the verge of collapse, and tried to put away a smile, pretending to ask seriously. Hina cried and shook her head. I don't know what to write. The moment I picked up the pen, my brain went blank. I would rather go to training than to take a cultural class. Roy's heart has turned out to be a nervous female man. Aware of Roy's weird eyes, Hina hurriedly defended. It's not just me, many others get 0 points. Smoker, Huo Shao Shan, they can't write a word. You are the only one qualified in the entire class. Still a full 100 points. The last sentence Hina said in an extremely dissatisfied tone. That feeling. Why are you blaming me for the way I look? Roy raised an eyebrow. So you won't write that you blame me? Well, so this time you come, Roy slowly said. Hina hesitated and said, you told me in the classroom before that you can help me improve my cultural class, right? She paused, lowered her head and said, not only the ideological and political courses, other courses include military command strategies, I also don't understand. The more Hina continued to speak, the lower her voice became, and the roots of her ears became red. No way, it's really shameful, but she has no other way, she can only come to Roy for help. Crane Vice Admiral does not care about other disciplines. She runs off after class. With her busy military affairs, she has no time to take care of all the students. The most important thing is that the establishment of military cultural courses in the military academy is something that only this year. The last class of students only took a single pass. Only Roy and the others have included cultural courses in the graduation assessment standards since this class. In other words, if you want to pass the graduation assessment and have a better job orientation after graduation, the cultural course cannot be left. Otherwise, it would be as cold as Hina on weekdays, and would not put the bottom to hug Roy's thigh. Roy looked at Hina in front of him quietly, without speaking for a while. Blushing again. With such a thin face, how can he be the queen of training in the future? He suddenly smiled. How could this task that was delivered to the door be completed? He hasn't forgotten the unfinished random task of the system. Random task distribution. Help Hina complete the cultural class score. Task reward. One of Marine 6 styles. Shave. The reward for the mission is the most practical shave in Marine 6 styles. It's just that he has to ponder over the schedule of this time. Well, since everyone is a classmate, it is definitely necessary to help you improve your grades. In Hina's expectant eyes, Roy spoke. It's just that this timing issue is not easy to solve. Roy, is it? When Hina heard Roy's words, her eyes lit up and she was surprised. It's okay, Roy, I know you are very self-disciplined and have a tight schedule. So my time here will fully cooperate with your arrangements. This is also pretty good. Roy nodded and said. In that case, let's go from 9 to 10 in the evening every night. This happens to be my self-study time. By the way, I can help you improve your homework. It should be no problem. Hina nodded gratefully. Thank you then. She immediately bowed to Roy to express her gratitude. Roy waved his hand. Okay, you go back quickly, I'm going to sleep. He checked the time, and it was 10:30. It's really troublesome. I wasted half an hour of rest time. Hina simply turned around and left, knowing that Roy was innocent. After seeing Hina gone, Roy was taken aback. He stared at the door of the empty dormitory blankly and suddenly shivered. This door was blasted, the bedroom was ventilated, and it was a bit chilly. Damn it. I forgot to find Hina and lost money. At this moment, far away from the bedroom, Kuzan and Guillaume smiled bitterly when they saw the scene just now, and both shook their heads involuntarily. I'm going back. Kuzan yawned, holding the back of his head with both hands, and said lazily. Guillaume joked. Aren't you going to the school to train? Kuzan's footsteps paused, but he didn't speak. Guillaume was left alone looking at Roy, who was slowly falling asleep in the dormitory in the distance, with a smile at the corner of his mouth. Let me see your potential with my own eyes tomorrow, junior brother Roy. Under the high-level publicity of Naval Headquarters, Roy's piece of On the Meaning of Effort, but within a day or two, spread to all major Marine departments of Grand Line. And the existence of this article also encouraged many young Marines to recollect the blood and youth of joining the Army and start their own efforts and struggles. This article. I didn't expect it was written by a freshman in the military academy. It's so exciting, it's really a period of nostalgia. Sunshine little guy, it seems that the military will become more and more interesting in the future. Yes, hard work is meaningful. As long as you keep moving forward, even if you fail to realize your dream in the end, you can at least see hope. Try hard. First, be a self-disciplined person. The confidence and smile on Yang's face, the sweat dripping in the soil, the soreness and exhaustion of the body will never lie to you. This is not chicken soup. Because Roy did not say in the article that as long as he works hard, he can definitely realize his dream. He simply said a simple truth that everyone knew before, but everyone has forgotten. Young people should be positive, perhaps. When everyone was young, they were radiant and fearless. But with the retirement of ordinary times and the turmoil of mundane things, they gradually put away their edges and corners, experienced the so-called growth, and could no longer believe that they were also stars in the universe. From that day on, their light has become dimmed, gradually knowing to hide, and no longer fearless. But Roy's appearance made them see the meaning of ordinary life again. Life is fighting. Despite the many disturbances from the outside world, Roy, who has been discussed by countless people, is implementing his plan step by step as before. The extra training at 4 o'clock in the morning is still very difficult. Luo Shu's physical fitness is slowly improving every day at a speed that is not surprising, but stable enough. And the self-discipline system, the training arranged for him, has not become relaxed with the improvement of his physical fitness. This system that can monitor Roy's physical condition at any time can always arrange a reasonable training plan, constantly testing Roy's limits, and making him progress on the verge of a physical breakdown. The sun is rising. Roy, who put on a clean military uniform, appeared on the military academy's field on time, just like everyone else. In the scorching summer, all the new students were dry. But the weird thing is, as Roy appeared and joined the team, the others couldn't help stopping their grievances, trying hard to calm down, straightening their chests, and standing on the ground like a javelin. They don't know why they are like this. Maybe it's because I saw that figure that worked hard enough and desperately enough. Feeling some kind of pressure myself? These days passed. They also read Roy's paper. I also learned about this classmate's crazy training at 4 o'clock in the morning from various sources. Seeing Roy standing there like an okay person, standing in a military posture waiting for the arrival of instructor. The hearts of everyone could not help but a sense of admiration welled up. Perhaps behind that seemingly lucid face is the persistence of gritted teeth. Just when the minds of the new students were different, a tall and slender figure slowly appeared in front of everyone from the distance of the school field. Slender legs stepped on a pair of high heels, and the broad snow-white cloak danced behind her. It's Momoshagi Vice Admiral. I didn't expect that the instructor of our swordsmanship course turned out to be her. Very good. Many people have similar ideas. Especially the male compatriots. All of them look like a blue peacock, subconsciously straighten their military caps and straighten their chests, wanting to show their heroic posture. Naval Headquarters Vice Admiral Momoshagi Gion, the first person in swordsmanship in the Marine system, and a personal disciple of Black Arm Zephyr. But, the name and prestige of this series are not as good as her other good name. The Flower of Justice. Well, Marine's first beauty. Widely accepted. I heard that T-Dolphin Vice Admiral has been pursuing Momoshagi Vice Admiral since the military school. Until now, I have confessed many times, but I have not succeeded. The mole standing next to Roy suddenly lowered his voice. Roy was taken aback. He didn't expect that the serious Marine Vice Admiral Mole in the later plot was also a big 8 trigrams. But thinking that this guy was an old-fashioned embryo who was fascinated by the Empress and almost turned into a stone statue, Roy felt relieved. Hello everyone from the military school. Momoshagi walked slowly to the newborn phalanx, and red lips lightly said. Her voice was slightly hoarse, but charming, and people couldn't help but give birth to a desire to conquer. It's just that the new students present at the scene did not dare to make her idea. All of them piled up a serious expression of watching their noses and hearts. From today, I will be the instructor of your swordsmanship class. Momoshagi smiled, but his eyes floated towards Roy's figure from time to time. Although swordsmanship is the art of killing enemies with swords, in fact, the most basic of swordsmanship is personal physical fitness. Without strong physical fitness, without enough strength and speed, all so-called superb swordsmanship is nothing but lethal. So, on the school grounds, a group of new military academies stood against the scorching sun above their heads and listened to Momoshagi's explanation of swordsmanship. Her straightforward explanation and analysis directly broke the mystery of the mysterious word, swordsmanship, for everyone, and everyone suddenly understood it and couldn't help but nod. And Roy listened with gusto. He comes from another world and has more or less exposure to swordsmanship in martial arts. But in this pirate world, the sword is not the sword recognized by the concept of the earth. It refers to swords in general. The swordsmen here are more like samurai in ancient Japan, and the swords they use are more similar to swords. On Earth, this kind of sword, also known as the Japanese sword, has a long, narrow and slightly curved blade, and a long single-edged handle. It is suitable for chopping and thrusting. Although I don't know if I have the talent for practicing swordsmanship, this does not prevent Roy from admiring swordsmen. Zephyr's boundless physical skills are strong. But the sword juggler is always more handsome. Being strong is temporary, but handsome is a lifetime. Roy doesn't know such a simple truth. Although you may not become a swordsman in the end for various reasons, the most basic swordsmanship of the master will have a lot of opportunities for you to face enemies with swords when you enter the battlefield in the future. Benefit. Momosagi's voice is very beautiful. As a soldier, the battlefield may be our final destination. Military academy is the fastest and safest stage where you can accumulate strength and lay a solid foundation. You must all cherish this precious time. The most important thing is that when you set foot on the battlefield in the future, you will truly discover that in the moment of life and death, all you can rely on, in addition to your own strength, are your comrades in arms. Having said that, Momosagi smiled softly. No matter where you are from, whether you were born rich or poor, whether your talent is good or bad, the classmates standing next to you today may be comrades in arms who will guard your back on the battlefield in the future, who can make you feel relieved to entrust life and death. This is the army. Once you put on that uniform, your life will not belong to you. Momosagi's words made Roy startled slightly and lost his thoughts. But what he didn't notice was, at such a moment, other freshmen, they all cast their eyes on him subconsciously. Momosagi, who noticed this scene, slightly smiled at the corners of his mouth. Is it true? This is the role of role models. Maybe even my cute little brother didn't notice that. Before not knowing it, he has become an idol that everyone in this class of military academy freshmen subconsciously looks up, chases, and obeys. Momosagi was not surprised by this. She could clearly perceive Roy's difference. It's really different. With the three guys Sakazuki, Kuzan and Paluzolino. Maybe those three guys have talents and abilities that are countless times more terrifying than Roy. But their character, just like their ability. Grumpy magma, the cold air, the light that travels well. It is simply impossible for other people to generate enough trust in their hearts. But Roy is different. He looked unremarkable. But always treat everything around him with a self-disciplined, active and passionate attitude. His words and deeds, his self-disciplined behavior. The act of saving everyone, all proved that he is a person who can be trusted and relied on. The existence of such a person will undoubtedly give others unprecedented confidence and hope on the battlefield. Momosagi now finally knows why Mr. Zephyr is so serious and optimistic about Roy, and even almost fell out with Marshal Sora over this matter. He saw hope from Roy. Okay, now the basic explanation is over. Before starting the demonstration, maybe you want to see, what kind of lethality does real swordsmanship have? Momosagi slowly put away his inner thoughts and said with a smile. When the freshmen heard this, their eyes suddenly brightened. Marine's #1 swordsman personally showed it? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They all subconsciously point their heads like garlic. Momosagi seemed very satisfied with everyone's reaction, and continued. However, when showing, I need an opponent to fight against. She frowned uncomfortably, and finally slowly locked her gaze on a certain figure. So, Roy, let's go out, with a charming smile. Smile like a flower. Roy, do you think you are humorous? In Roy's heart, it was a mouthful of old blood that couldn't be vomited out. This feminine smile of Momosagi Vice Admiral has a meaningful meaning no matter how I look at it. That. Momosagi Vice Admiral, should we leave this opportunity to other students who need it more? I'm actually not that interested in swordsmanship. Seeing Momosagi had already pulled out the golden sword Jinpiro on his waist, Roy knew that he would definitely be unlucky this time. When Momosagi heard Roy's words, he smiled so charmingly and stunned the other freshmen that it was impossible. That won't work. She squinted her eyes. The narrow eyes of Dangfang exudes a certain dangerous atmosphere between the beautiful black hair. Student Roy, I have read your essay, and even Marshal Kong has included your essay in the ranks of the study materials for officers in this department. It's really well written, didn't you say it? Every class we have taken, every actual battle we participated in, every stage we took. Every bullet, every punch, every success and failure, every fall and rise. It will leave a mark in our lives, it will always affect our future in a special way. Momosagi recites Roy's thesis verbatim, and his tone is full of admiration. Well, so, every sword you take in this swordsmanship class, oh no, every sword you see will have a great impact on your future life. Maybe, you who fought with me today will meet an extremely powerful swordsman pirate in the future, and then at that time, what you have learned today will become your only support for survival. Roy almost spat out blood. It's okay not to take you to play like this, you are the words of the heart. What else is every cut taken? So are you really going to cut me? Roy had a dead heart at this time. This is shady. He didn't know why Momosagi, the Queen Oni-san, stared at him. Obviously he didn't do anything, and he didn't provoke her. But at this time, looking at Momosagi's menacing eyes, there are the eyes that other students are looking forward to. Roy can only bite the bullet. It's hard to ride a tiger. This persona created by myself, can it fall apart? So he took a deep breath, suppressed all the complex emotions in his heart, and took a steady step forward. Naval Headquarters freshman, Roy, get out, he said solemnly. Thanks to the Hell-style training arranged by the system during this period, After constantly challenging and stimulating the physical and mental limits, Roy's mentality and will have been well tempered. He is able to withstand the pressure behind almost any matter he is facing now. Is that self-confidence? Roy knew that he had no chance of winning against a monster like Momoshage. But this does not mean that he will be timid. Momoshage glanced at Roy appreciatively. What a great will. This kind of dazzling fighting spirit, this kind of fighting eyes. You do it, don't worry, I won't use any haki. Momoshage raised the sword in his hand and smiled. Roy nodded. Although this is just a demonstration of a swordsmanship lesson, and his Roy is just a target to show Momoshage's amazing swordsmanship, being a target is not his Roy habit. The most important is, the answer to a question he really wants to know now is. After this period of study in military academy, after experiencing the hard work of the system night and day during this period, experienced countless self-discipline that other people can't imagine in the middle of the night. How far has he reached? What a long distance away from an admiral-level expert like Momoshage. And at this moment, at the moment when Roy made this determination, the voice of the system suddenly rang in his mind. Congratulations to host Roy for the initial understanding of the principle of self-discipline. The essence of self-discipline is a process of continuous self-transcendence. No matter what kind of opponents and enemies you face, no matter what harsh environment you face, you must go all out and leave no regrets. Thematic task distribution. Challenge yourself. Task description. Challenge Naval Headquarters Vice Admiral Momoshage Gion, and successfully hit any part of the opponent's body before losing. Task completion reward. The system will distribute the rewards of the previous task, prove yourself. Together. At that time, you will get a training system that best matches your body and training style. Note. Thematic tasks are extremely important. They are one of the few rewarding tasks in the self-discipline system. Please complete them carefully. Tasks with rewards. Or is it a training system? Could it be that the legendary traveler cheat reward is coming? Yes. I heard that the other traversers just crossed the Dragon Elephant Town prison power, started Rinnegan, cut through the eternity with one knife, and played with the second Pengu. I am also a traverser with cheat, so the benefits should not be bad, right? Well, don't be too greedy, a One Punch Man template is almost enough. Seeing the system's rare explanations, Roy's eyes lit up immediately, and tears were about to flow out of his eyes. Others traversed it all the way to slay all kinds of unscrupulous waves, and force oneself to self-discipline when traversing his mother's system. Get up in the morning and study, attend classes, and practice greedily. Even drinking water has to drink hot water. Do you know how bad it is to drink hot water on a hot day? Can Lousy just want to have a can of iced coal? That's right, it just can't. Kuole is not without this world. The system just won't let it. Why is it that drinking ice is bad for the stomach, easy to have diarrhea, and high in sugar and easy to gain weight? Good boy, do you think I am afraid of gaining weight? Tenten practiced so, the cute little belly has become 8-pack abs, okay. But this theme task is a bit interesting. You must know that this so-called self-discipline system is largely like a punishment system. Usually, if there is nothing to do, let you come to shock therapy, which makes you want to die. But those daily self-discipline tasks such as training, learning, cleaning up the dormitory, drinking hot water, and sleeping on time are not rewarded at all. Only punishment. Now it's a rare task to have a reward. Roy is very motivated at this time. This thought flashed in his mind, and Roy condensed his eyes and clenched his fist tightly. The incomparable fighting spirit bloomed in his eyes like a raging fire. The expression in his eyes gradually became solemn, as tough as a rock. He has no chance of winning, but he has confidence. His fighting spirit immediately attracted the attention of other military academies. Student Roy looks very confident. Smoker gritted his teeth tightly, looking at the thin young figure from the back. The blood in his heart gradually boiled. The ghost spider on the side nodded deeply, too. It's amazing. Facing a strong man like Momoshage Vice Admiral, that kind of oppressive feeling rushes over. There is still this kind of perseverance. The cold eyes are also filled with admiration. Not only the two of them, others were surprised and shocked watching Roy, who was slowly stepping forward and holding his head high, cheering for him silently in their hearts. At the end of the crowd, Haina's eyes flashed with long pink hair, and a thought flashed in her heart. Turns out this is what you really look like, Roy. It's really kind of handsome. Momoshage saw the different expressions of everyone, and finally fell on Roy's body, and a meaningful smile was gradually drawn at the corner of his mouth. Yes, the mental outlook of a person who is prepared and who is not prepared is completely different. Because there is no regret, she can understand. Roy's talent is far less than Sakazuki and the others, but he has tried his best. Whether it's the military academy's courses or the bits and pieces in life, he has perfectly achieved the ultimate he can do. And when you have achieved everything ultimate and put all your sweat and effort into it, you will not have any fear or hesitation even in the face of enemies and predicaments that you know you can't defeat at all. Because you know, in the end, even if it fails, you will not have any regrets. After losing, you will not cry with grief and regret why you didn't work harder at the beginning. After defeat, to entangle and hesitate, it would be nice if you weren't lazy in the first place, such a meaningless assumption. Very good, Momosagi's smiled. Then Roy moved. At the same time, Momosagi's pupils shrank slightly. Boom. Only a dull sound was heard, and a small pothole appeared in the ground under Roy's feet. This power is pretty good. This thought flashed through Momosagi's mind. Others also saw this scene with shocking eyes. Fast speed. This explosive force. Unexpectedly, Roy's physical fitness is already so strong. That kind of explosive power is not a physical skill at all. There is no beauty or technique at all, only the purest explosive power. This is the result of countless weight training. This is the result of countless extra nights. The dust on the school field suddenly rose, and the gale swept the yellow sand howling all over the sky. In less than 3 seconds, Roy's figure passed a distance of tens of meters in the billowing dust. Next moment, his figure tore apart the yellow sand in the sky like a tiger. Clenched fists slammed hard at Momosagi. Everyone's eyes widened suddenly, and many people even let out an exclamation involuntarily. This is destined to be remembered in the memory by the many freshmen present. In the yellow sand flying all over the sky, there was a teenager with a confident smile on his mouth. With a powerful posture of a tiger pounding for food. Eyes firmly, towards one of the most powerful forces in naval headquarters. He threw a punch that belonged to him without reservation. This is a punch full of passion and youth. The scorching sun shone brightly from the sky, spreading across the back of the punching young man who jumped high in the air. Spread a layer of golden sand on the plain military uniform soaked in sweat and mud. The picture freezes suddenly at this moment. Then, boom. Roy's figure flew upside down like a cannonball, and smashed heavily to the ground, raising a thick cloud of dust. The freshmen of the military academy suddenly covered their eyes and couldn't bear to take a breath. This looks very painful. Well, strength and speed are quite good. With your training years, you are already a genius. Momosagi slowly retracted the golden knife that had blocked Roy's punch, and smiled with undisguised admiration in a pair of beautifully glowing eyes. In the distance of the schoolyard, in a huge pothole, Roy's figure staggered to his feet. Yingyingzujo's figure appeared so tall in the flying dust. I'm not a genius. He came out in the distance with a hoarse, smiling voice. Momosagi's eyes lit up. The body's resistance to blows is pretty good, and he stood up again so quickly. She lowered her head and looked at the body of her famous sword, Jin Pila, as if there was a bright red fist mark on it. She didn't actually shoot the blow just now. As she promised, she didn't need observation hockey, she just predicted Roy's movements in advance, and then used Kimbiro's blade to block Roy's long-standing punch. Rao is so. With the impact caused by Roy's full charge just now, the reaction force falls on Roy's fist, which is not so pleasant. The bloody fist mark on the golden knife is the best evidence. There is no need for observation hockey, and even Momosagi, who does not understand medical skills, can easily determine that Roy's right hand definitely suffered at least 3 phalanx fractures under the punch just now. When she heard Roy's words, she was taken aback for a moment and then smiled knowingly. Yes, he is right. It is indeed an insult to use the term genius to describe him. He doesn't need such vain praise. Tick. At this moment, the quiet sound of water droplets fell slowly from the depths of the billowing dust. Strong wind. The cloak of justice behind Momosagi didn't stop dancing, and the dust dissipated everywhere. Roy's figure caught everyone's eyes. They only felt a sudden pain in their heart, and their complexion changed drastically. The ticking bright red liquid slowly slid down the boy's right arm bone, making almost his entire arm flushed. The blood dazzlingly fell on the sand under the feet, and gathered into a shocking brown circle. Even sharp-eyed people can faintly see that on the fingers of Roy's right hand. A pale color is faintly visible in the fuzzy piece of flesh and blood. What a serious injury. It can be seen that. Just now, Roy's punch was terrifying. Everyone clenched their fists subconsciously. However, what made them even more shocked was that, even after being hit so hard, Roy's hand, still clenching his fists tightly. Momosagi frowned and said solemnly, "Don't you hurt?" After speaking, she was stunned, because the young junior brother showed a cheerful and hearty smile at her. White teeth, youthful face, glistening in the sun. Pain? It's better to hurt than to lose. Roy glanced at his horrible arm casually, shook his head and chuckled. I'm used to this kind of pain. When the voice fell, Momosagi's pupils suddenly shrank. There are so many nerves on the fingers that connect to the brain, and the taste of a broken finger is even more hellish. Such an injury may not be fatal at all, but the physical pain it brings is definitely not something ordinary people can bear. Changed to other slightly weak-willed young people, it is estimated that the pain has passed out, right? And he actually said that he himself was used to this kind of pain. How terrifying is his usual training? Momosagi sighed, what a stubborn little guy. She slowly pulled the golden sword around a swordflower, just about to put the sword into its sheath. Momosagi Vice Admiral, it's not over yet, Roy said suddenly. Momosagi was stunned. Do you still want to continue? Roy smiled. You haven't shot yet, have you? Come on, show it. Let me see the strength of a world-class swordsman. He slowly raised his left hand and made a provocative gesture. Quiet. Deathly silence. Everyone stared at the young man who was standing in the big pit and smiling wantonly, and his expression gradually became extremely moved. Is he serious? This is just a swordsmanship demonstration in a swordsmanship class? Even if Momosagi Vice Admiral doesn't use any haki, he can't touch the former heir, let alone have the slightest chance of winning. This is not a battle at the same level of strength. Even if Roy is desperate enough, even if he is more self-disciplined than anyone else. Even his strength, speed and explosiveness have been recognized by Momosagi Vice Admiral. He was obviously seriously injured. Hey, Roy, it's almost done, don't be brave. If this goes on, your injury, the warm-hearted Hu Shaoshan couldn't help but speak blushingly. But the ghost spider next to him suddenly gave him a look, preventing him from continuing. Don't persuade. Don't you see his eyes? Ghost Spider's face was solemn, and his voice revealed an inexplicable hoarseness. Huo Shaoshan was taken aback, then opened his eyes wide and looked at Roy. When the others heard the Ghost Spider, they also looked at Roy's eyes. They were all stunned. No one speaks anymore. No one dared to speak out to dissuade. Momosagi also slowly fell into silence, with a pair of beautiful eyes quietly looking at the slightly trembling young figure in the distance. Roy didn't hide his eyes. Hot, perseverance. Full of confidence, but apart from these same ingredients as before. Everyone can see that touch hidden in the deepest part of all emotions. Unwilling. Yes, he is unwilling. Why are you unwilling? You clearly know in your heart that facing me, you have no chance of winning, junior brother. Momosagi sighed silently in his heart. Do you think you can win? She frowned and asked in a deep voice. Roy grinned hard. Smiled and shook his head. No, I can't win. Even if you give me another year, no, even if it is 10 years, I don't think I can beat you, Momosagi Vice Admiral. The words he said in his mouth were very relaxed, but inexplicably made other people feel a bit heavy, as if his heart was firmly pressed by something, and as if his throat was blocked by something. Extraordinarily heavy. This is the truth. A cold, cruel reality. Momosagi Gion is a super genius with a talent that can be compared with the three monsters of Akainu, Kizaru, and Aokiji. Beneath that beautiful appearance that has been coveted by countless people is a shocking combat power that is powerful enough to eclipse anyone. Although Roy so far, his performance in the military academy has been excellent enough, even radiant. But in the minds of countless people, it's just that. They will only admire Roy, but not envy Roy. Just as they would admire Akainu in the three of them, but would not admire them. Because, envy is how ordinary people feel about genius. And admire, to a certain extent, it is pitiful. It's impossible to win. Even if he is given another 10 years, it is impossible to win. What kind of willpower and courage is it to make Roy say such a thing with a smile? He clearly knew the gap between the two sides. Even if I desperately can't catch up in a lifetime. But he still wanted to shoot. I want to see the top combat power in this sea. Why is that? Momosagi sighed. Seeing Roy's resolute young face, she felt a little unbearable in her heart. Roy paused. Why? To be honest, I don't know why. This is obviously an indifferent demonstration. Whether you win or lose, it will not affect him. Loss is inevitable, but he is a bit unwilling. It's not that I'm not reconciled to losing or knowing how to lose. But not reconciled to the opponent's failure to make a single move. He lost so cleanly and thoroughly. Obviously I have been so desperate, I am already so self-disciplined. No matter how you have to see Momosagi make a sword with your own eyes. Because I want to know how far first him from Marine Admiral. He suddenly raised his head and said, the eyes are decisive. Although Momosagi only has the rank of Vice Admiral, it is already recognized as Admiral in terms of combat power. Momosagi was instantly moved when he heard Roy's words. I see, your goal is Admiral. Student Roy, then you have to work harder than you are now many, many times. She smiled brightly, the slender fingers held the handle of the famous knife on his waist. A majestic and sharp breath gradually rose up around her body. Strong wind, the two oppose each other, and far away. A stalwart figure with purple hair stood on the military fortress, watching this scene quietly, her lips pressed tightly, her expression complex. What exactly is the sense of oppression brought by an Admiral-class combat force full of momentum? Few people will know. Marine Admiral represents the highest combat power of the world government. Every Admiral-level powerhouse is the person standing at the top of this sea. The opportunities and opponents that can give them full shots are few. But now, everyone present felt it. That almost suffocating feeling of oppression. That kind of terrifying atmosphere that even the air has become heavy and dense. All the freshmen present at the military academy gave birth to a feeling of difficulty breathing. But they are just a bystander, a spectator, it's hard to imagine. Facing the severely injured young man alone, facing the pressure of Admiral-class aura, what kind of terrifying pressure is under his heart? Are you ready? Momoshagi spoke slowly. After holding the famous knife around her waist, the smile on her face had already converged, replaced by an almost solemn sternness. Under those thin willow eyebrows, a pair of eyes that should have been rippling with Chiubo also showed a vigorous fighting spirit. It seemed that the young man in front of him was not a poorly weak military academy freshman, but an opponent whose strength was comparable to her. I'm already ready. Roy said softly, the figure rushed out like a beast again. The mud under his feet flew up, and at the extremely fast running speed, the violent wind blowing on his face blew his messy black hair into flying. He knew very well, facing an opponent of this level, once the heart is timid and starts to shrink, there will be no chance again. He didn't ask much, it was just a blow. When other people saw this scene, their eyes suddenly widened. Still attack. Isn't the lesson learned just now enough? However, Momoshagi smiled satisfied. Roy and other freshmen have entered the military academy for a short time, and it is too late to learn any decent fighting skills, let alone accumulate enough combat experience. In her eyes, Roy's movement towards herself was fast, but it was full of loopholes, and there was no place to be praised. But it is precisely because of this that Momoshagi praises Roy in her heart. Facing an opponent who is stronger than himself and has more experience than himself, only the brave have the opportunity. Blindly conservative, hesitant, and retreat, it is impossible to win. Because the other party is far more sophisticated than you. Meet on a narrow road, the brave wins, distance of tens of meters. At Roy's rushing speed today, it only takes 2 or 3 seconds. In a blink of an eye, that fist was already in the reflection of Momosagi's eyes, constantly magnifying. Fist down. Easily and as unsurprisingly. Momoshagi just tilted his head slightly, and Roy's fist fell through. The figures of the two interlaced in an instant. Momoshagi picked up the corner of his mouth, bend your knees. A heavy knee bump. But the next moment, she frowned. Boom. Accompanied by a heavy muffled sound. Roy actually reflected it in time at this moment and kicked himself at the same time. The power of terror exploded on the legs of the two. Roy's figure couldn't help making a muffled noise, and the figure flew out against the ground. The new students' eyelids trembled, and their hearts throbbed. Although Momoshagi Vice Admiral didn't use armament hockey, the power of this foot was not something Roy could bear. You have done well enough. Momoshagi smiled and said, stepping lightly on the ground, and the slender figure flew out suddenly, catching up faster than Roy flew out. The two figures approached infinitely in midair. It's over. Momoshagi in midair said such a sentence and drew his sword outrageously. Kang. The sound of the sharp knife dragging the scabbard thunderously made people's eardrums painful. She hesitated for a moment, a turn of the wrist. The back of the famous sword Jinpiro slid violently towards Roy's chest. But at this moment, Roy, who should have been uncontrollable in the air, suddenly opened his eyes. The corners of the blood-stained mouth evoked a crazy arc. Momoshagi was taken aback. The next moment, there was nothing before her eyes. Roy's figure suddenly disappeared. This is shave. How can it be? The purple-haired figure, who had been carefully observing the battle from a very far distance, suddenly let out a stunned low voice. In an instant, you shouldn't be careless, let alone use the back of a knife. Roy's hoarse voice sounded from behind Momoshagi. Momosagi's eyes condensed, slightly lost, turned around and swung the knife subconsciously. This time, it's a blade. Buzzing. The incomparable sharp buzzing sound suddenly exploded the waves. That is the roar of Jian Qi, not good. Do not. It's over. Roy, in the horrified eyes of everyone. A golden arc of sword, turned into a turbulent wave tens of meters high, like a giant's sword, falling down. Boom. Endless explosions and the roaring and tearing sound of the earth continued to sound. The golden moon arc sword energy slashed, like a mighty occasion, magnificently cutting the ground of the school field in half. The earth-shaking roar and the tearing sound of the earth exploded one after another, setting off huge dust waves of hundreds of meters. This moment, it seemed that the entire naval headquarters Marineford was shaking and shaking. Everyone was in horror, staring dumbfounded at this extremely shocking scene, and there was a biting chill in their hearts. They stared dully at the billowing dust and smoke, the huge sword-marked groove that stretched from the feet of Momosagi Vice Admiral all the way to the extreme, and they all had such a thought in their hearts. Could it be? Momosagi Vice Admiral killed Roy, right? A sword with such a terrifying power, they really couldn't understand what room Roy had for survival. Rumble. The sound of the earth tearing slightly still sounded. Momosagi stared blankly at the famous knife in his hand, and the hand that held the knife actually trembled slightly. At a certain moment, suddenly she let out a long breath, a smile was drawn at the corner of her mouth, and she whispered. Is it worth it? The freshmen of the military academy were stunned. Listen to what Momosagi Vice Admiral said, Roy is still alive. They reacted immediately and looked at that position with their eyes wide open. A thin and swaying figure that seemed to fall at any time was looming in the dense smoke. At the same time, Roy came in a hoarse voice with a cheerful smile. It's worth it. What's not worth it? I won after all. The hot wind blows away the lingering dust on the school grounds. Roy's figure also gradually appeared in front of everyone. All of them suddenly involuntarily took a breath, their eyes flushed. Many of these girls like Hina couldn't help covering their mouths with their hands, lest they let out uncontrollable exclamations. A tragic scar, it seems to be cut all the way from the chest on the left to the abdomen on the right. Hung-chun is on Roy's chest. The bright red blood gurgled out continuously, dripping tick by tick at his feet, and finally gathered into a small pool of blood. Momosagi frowned upon seeing this, and a trace of unbearable guilt flashed in his heart. Your injury was far from being like this, but... Roy's pale face squeezed a hard smile, but I used a shave. Yes, he used a shave. Although Momosagi didn't know how Roy, a military academy freshman, could shave in Master Marine 6 styles. Although Roy's shave is quite immature, almost jerky, without skill or beauty at all. But he used it after all, and in order to use this trick to shave, he has exploded with a load far beyond what his body can accept, completely exceeding Roy's own limit. This also led to, originally, Momosagi's slash with the back of the knife might have been just a mark that was not light or heavy on his body. I learned a lesson, but in the end it caused such a terrifying wound. That kind of feeling is equivalent to the moment when Roy started shave. He abruptly met his chest against the back of Momosagi's knife. Even the back of the knife is still sharp enough. Why are you so desperate? Momosagi sighed and looked at Roy with a gaze that was almost doubtful. His eyes were extremely complicated. Just to hit me. She subconsciously looked down at her abdomen, and there was a clear fist mark with a slight bloodline on it. Such strength was of little importance to her, but it was enough to prove that Roy had indeed punched himself with his badly broken arm. But what is the meaning of such a soft and weak punch to oneself? On the contrary, it stimulated his own neural response at the most critical moment, subconsciously wanting to resist, and slashed with a backhand. If you don't react in time at the last minute, the blade is slightly off the edge. Roy now probably has been cut in half by himself. Yes, just to hit you. Roy laughed, his snow-white teeth stained red with blood. Moreover, I did win. Momosagi Vice Admiral, at the last minute, you used observation hockey, right? Momosagi frowned her eyebrows, and looked at Roy's indifferent look that was obviously injured. She was angry and distressed. In any case, this little guy was hurt by himself. But when I used observation hockey myself, isn't it because you suddenly shaved it and caught me off guard? I did it to save you. Otherwise, my body is swinging the knife subconsciously, you are now a dead person. But this bastard knew it was dangerous, just to punch yourself. I'll ask you again, are you sure it's worth it for you to do this? Momosagi said solemnly, his voice gradually mixed with anger. Roy smiled and nodded. Of course it's worth it. He listened to the task completed prompt from the system in his mind, and his heart couldn't be more worthwhile. This damn task is finally completed. Roy had only one thought in his mind at this time. Too difficult, it's so King hard. This bastard system actually wants me to single out against Marine Admiral for a poor recruit like me, and have to hit the opponent once? If this is not a military academy's exercise class. If the Admiral powerhouse in front of you is not Momosagi. If it weren't for the self-disciplined task of helping Hina improve her cultural class performance recently, he didn't even have a chance at all. Hoo. The rush of breathing passed through the hot chest and throat, and every breath of air passed through the trachea like a knife, making him very uncomfortable. At this moment, Roy loves and hates the hellish training arranged by the bastard's self-discipline system. Love is that after so many trainings to challenge the limits of the body, his tolerance for injuries and pain has far surpassed what humans can imagine, and with it, a substantial increase in willpower. And what I hate is, he is so painful now. Momosagi's bitch, even if it was the back of the knife, even if it was deliberately holding back the strength, it was choking. If it weren't for systematic training, he might have passed out. It's fine to faint, at least that is that the nervous system is protecting your body, avoiding excessive painful stimulation and causing nerve breakdown. What an incurable fool. Looking at Roy's smiling and silly son nodding in front of him, Momosagi couldn't help biting her bright lower lip, and Chunin couldn't help but cursed. She had heard the rumors of Roy, read Roy's article. I have also seen Roy struggle to read at night. She thinks she already has a certain understanding of Roy's madness and self-discipline. But what she never expected was, Roy turned out to be such a strong desire to win. I really don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. Momosagi thought about it, and suddenly frowned. Suddenly she felt a faint pain coming from her abdomen. What's wrong? Could it be that Roy hit himself in a rush just now? Impossible. With Roy's power, even if he stood still and let him punch him with all his strength, it still felt too great. But at this time, Momosagi suddenly found out. Roy in front of him raised his hand tremblingly. What else does he want to do? Doubts appeared in Momosagi's heart. I saw Roy's left hand lifted, grabbed the collar of his military uniform, and then pulled hard. Laugh. The uniform that was stained red by his blood was torn off by him, revealing Roy's almost perfect, cheetah-like physique. After making such an action, Roy's brows were twisted tightly, and a thin layer of cold sweat spread on his pale face. It can be seen that his physical condition is really bad. The piercing pain tortured him. What else do you want to do? What you need now is to go to the military medical department for treatment. Momosagi's voice was cold and authentic, but there was a hint of worry and guilt in her tone. Roy smiled, but with the blood-stained military uniform in his hand, he strode hard and walked towards Momosagi. The others are stunned. What else does Roy want to do? Does he continue to fight? How can this be? His body has clearly reached its limit. Is he going to die? Tread. The heavy footsteps echoed slowly on the huge school field, and in the silence, the slow and difficult footsteps seemed extremely heavy. Momosagi was stunned. The figure involuntarily took 2 steps back. Seeing Roy's bloody appearance swaying towards herself, the flow of various emotions in her heart made her feel a little withdrawal and fear. She gritted her silver teeth and stopped backing. There are so many students around, and she is absolutely unable to show the fear in her heart. Roy finally came to Momosagi. He slowly raised his head and smiled at Momosagi. Momosagi looked at Roy's tragic smile and trembled inexplicably. Momosagi Vice Admiral, thank you for your guidance. Then, he moved extremely softly, gently unfold the military uniform in your hand. Trembling hands stretched out toward the sides of Momosagi's waist. Finally, the sleeves of the military uniform were tied around Momosagi's waist. After doing all this, Roy slowly leaned his body forward and moved closer to Momosagi's ear. Feeling the hot and strong bloody smell of the boy in front of him, Momosagi's body trembled slightly. She wants to push Roy away, but she was afraid of hurting Roy again. Most importantly, Roy did not touch himself. Just when Momosagi's inner mood was complicated, Roy's weak and hoarse voice came in her ears. Momosagi Vice Admiral, when it's inconvenient, go back quickly. Well, drink more hot water. Momosagi stayed, and immediately reacted. A rare blush stained her cold cheeks. What a shame. Momosagi blushed. On the beauty of the frosty and snowy face in the past, at this moment, shyness and anger were blooming. Like the proud plum blossom in the snow, it blooms with magnificent colors under the warmth and moisture of the sun. Such a strong front-to-back contrast made the surrounding students stare blankly. What exactly is going on? Obviously, I was fighting a lot just now. Why did Momosagi Vice Admiral blush as soon as Roy leaned up? If you change other people to get so close, I think I was cut off by Momosagi Vice Admiral, who has a cold personality but a hot temper, right? I heard that Vice Admiral once tried to steal Momosagi Vice Admiral, and his legs were broken alive, and now he still has a crutch from time to time when he walks. Ma Dan, is the handsome body really so attractive? Even the iceberg of Momosagi Vice Admiral has been melted? A group of male classmates saw Roy's vigorous and streamlined muscles. He lowered his head again and rubbed his fat belly because he often ran out to drink and drink skewers, secretly distressed and secretly envious, and I have to exercise self-discipline to reduce weight. Otherwise, after the entire military academy's freshman training, I can't even find my girlfriend. The male classmate here is envious and jealous, but the female classmate is blushing with bright eyes. Well, no matter which world you are in, there are women hooligans. Especially in the army, the girl's personality is relatively open, and it's a wonderful and full of anger to make a little pornography in private. Roy is a handsome guy himself, but because he is usually alone because of self-discipline, he basically doesn't participate in social activities, and even girls want to chase after him. It's just that they didn't expect that under Roy's handsome face, after taking off a military uniform, it would be so unexpected. Tisk tusk tusk, the figure management makes them want to stop. When the other male students saw the female students' expressions, they curled their lips. Sure enough, handsome guys are especially popular everywhere. Among the freshman team, there is only one person with a wonderful expression, and that is Hina. Seeing Roy, leaning against Momosagi's ear, her eyes seemed to burst into flames, her silver teeth crackled, and the smoker next to her could not help but shrink away from her. Step. The strange pain in the lower abdomen gushed out again, making Momosagi frown. For girls, it is not convenient to have so many days in a month. It turned out that the pain was caused by my aunt, not because of Roy's punch. Counting the days is almost correct for these 2 days. What I didn't expect was that I originally planned to come to the military academy to teach a class easily, but finally broke out with all my strength. Feeling the warmth of the uniform that wrapped her body, Momosagi only felt that the anger just now disappeared. Unexpectedly, this junior brother is still very gentle and attentive. In order to avoid embarrassment, the generals took off their uniforms and covered their legs. But, what is the reason for drinking more hot water? She subconsciously wanted to ask, but there was a whirring sound in her ear. Momosagi was stunned, only feeling a sinking shoulder. She subconsciously reached out and hugged Roy, who was about to fall. With physical exhaustion and a lot of blood loss, is the body finally unable to bear to faint? Momosagi sighed. She quietly looked at the young face sleeping soundly in her arms, and a smile suddenly appeared on her face. But what she didn't know was, the freshmen not far away screamed frantically when they saw this scene. Hug. He actually hugged it. This story is developing too fast. The dim white light slowly became clear before my eyes. A ray of light gradually spread, and what caught your eye was a white ceiling. The ceiling fan on the ceiling dangled, bringing a relaxing breeze. The air was filled with a strong smell of disinfectant water, pungent and disgusting. A hospital? Roy's chapped lips moved, making a weak, hoarse voice. The moment the voice just fell, he felt a fiery heart-piercing pain gushing out of every muscle in his body, rushing to his brain as if overwhelming, and he couldn't help making a muffled noise. Don't mess with the brat. At this time, a low and funny voice came from his side. Roy was taken aback and turned away with difficulty. I saw a burly and majestic figure with purple hair standing by the window of the ward like a rock, looking calmly out of the window. Teacher Zephyr. 3 minor rib fractures, 4 fractures of the phalanges, fractures of the calves, extensive trauma to the chest, plus physical exhaustion. He slowly turned around, gave Roy an angry look, and smiled. This kind of injury, let alone a swordsmanship class, you said that the old man just came back from the New World Crusade against Whitebeard, I believe it. The corners of Roy's mouth twitched slightly. He also knew that he was playing off this time. Life is the battlefield. A disapproving smile appeared at the corner of Roy's mouth, and he shrugged indifferently. But such a small movement shook his wound, causing him to frown in pain. Zephyr looked helplessly at Roy, who was bandaged on the hospital bed like rice dumplings, and sighed. When is the time? Still playing handsome, silly boy. So are you. Why do you have to fight against Guion? Roy curled his lips and retorted. It was her who stared at me first, okay old man, but I went to class obediently and didn't do anything. She approached me without saying anything, and asked me to be a target for her swordsmanship demonstration. Naturally, Roy would not say anything about the system task, and could only push everything to Momosagi's side. Zephyr smiled bitterly. You should know that she is not malicious, she is just a little curious about you. After all, your essay is a bit surprising, and it is understandable. Roy nodded. He also knew that Momosagi was not malicious. The most important thing is that from the beginning to the end of the battle, on the school field, Momosagi kept his strength all the time. Otherwise, even if Roy is cunning, and hides the information of his, shaved, one of the Master Marine 6 styles, he won't be able to come across Momosagi who doesn't even use haki. To know, for a master of her level, carefully cares not to hurt Roy, but it is much more troublesome and headache than going all out in front of an opponent of the same level. The two fell silent gradually. In the empty military academy ward, only the sound of an electric fan rang. Zephyr looked at Roy quietly, looked at the young devil's too young face, saw the stubborn eyes tightly squinted, and couldn't help but ask again. So Brat, can you talk to the old man? Roy raised his head. Say what? Zephyr frowned and continued. Talk about why you were being stupid. Talk about. Why do you have to fight to that level? You know it in your heart, don't you? As you said, even if you give you another 10 years, you can't fight Guion head-on. When it came to the last sentence, Zephyr's voice lowered, even a little inexplicably cautious, as if for fear of hurting Roy's self-esteem. Roy shook his head and smiled. Old man, I know. He looked calmly at Zephyr, who looked sad in front of him. But there are some things. If you don't try hard, how do you know how far you are from your goal? Although failure is inevitable, all I know is that if I don't go all out, I will regret this scene in the future. Yes, he doesn't want to regret, it's rare to cross once. He will live happily and thoroughly, in this precarious world. In this sea of crisis and life and death, maybe during this period of military academy. It's the last time he can toss at will, soon. After he graduated from the military academy. He is about to officially enter the army, by the time. He is about to go to the battlefield. This is not an age of peace. During the turbulent era of the great pirates, a large number of pirates swarmed out like bamboo shoots after the rain. Even the Marine, which is known as the world's largest military organization, was exhausted. Even in some remote branches, they are also facing various crises. He knew that he was the only one he could rely on. Unlike other traversers, my own system cheat is not too heaven-defying. If you insist on saying yes, that is, it allowed Roy to gradually develop a very good habit, and to adapt to this kind of pain. But precisely because the training is really too painful and exhausting. He didn't want to give up. Regret, Zephyr heard Roy's answer, his eyes suddenly trance, his lips moved slightly and whispered. Roy laughed. Yes. Old man, didn't you come here in the same way in your past life? Doing everything well and not letting go of any opportunity, isn't it just that you don't want to make yourself regretful in your future life? Roy didn't finish, only felt a pain in his neck. In the blink of an eye, Zephyr's figure had appeared before his eyes, and that sturdy and powerful hand was actually pinching his throat like iron tongs. Roy was stunned, because Zephyr's eyes were flushed and bloodshot. Different. Zephyr angered, in a tone that was almost roaring. I know you are very self-disciplined. I also know that you have worked hard enough. But if you do this, it has nothing to do with hard work and self-discipline. You are masochistic. Do you understand? Keep on like this, you can't do anything. Zephyr's eyes were as red as the devil, and his voice was hoarse, and even spit stars spurted out with excitement. He clenched Roy's neck tightly, his eyes that had gone through countless vicissitudes of life were filled with pain. Yes, Brat, you go desperately like this. Does it really make sense? Even the old man watching me silently beside me? I can't stand it anymore. The daily training is made like life and death by you. The study after class makes you gritted your teeth. And this should be an ordinary swordsmanship lesson. In the end, you were lying in the ward of this hospital with all your body wounds. Is it really worth it? Self-discipline is a good thing. But what about self-abuse? Zephyr gritted his teeth tightly, looking like he hates iron for not making steel. I know, Roy suddenly laughed. Ms. Zephyr, I really know. He looked at Zephyr seriously and spoke word by word. Actually, I want to be like everyone else. He smiled softly, calmly, and full of yearning. Simply go to class when you go to class. Those cultural classes that don't seem to be useful, you can slip away. After class is over, I put aside the books cleanly, and I don't even think about learning things. When you're in a good mood, go to the bubble girl classmate. Even if the confession is rejected, it doesn't matter, the next one is better anyway. When you are in a bad mood, just run out with other classmates to play cards, gambling, and drinking. It doesn't matter if you win or lose, it doesn't matter if you are drunk or not. That kind of life is indeed very comfortable and easy. But I can't help it. The existence of the system makes it impossible for me to be so free and unrestrained. I can think of it here. Roy couldn't help but shook his head slightly. Even if the system does not exist, is this kind of life really what I want? Ask yourself. Ask yourself from the bottom of your heart. Even if this damn system never existed, do you really want to eat and wait for death like this? To be honest, in fact, he already had the answer faintly in his mind. This is not the calm, comfortable, and peaceful earth he used to be. Here is another world. Self-discipline is not enough. This place is full of dangers, any pirate can take his own life. Not to mention the 4 emperors of the New World. Only with self-masochistic efforts can we truly improve our survivability. Even if I want to be a salted fish like everyone else. But what Roy is afraid of is, in that day, when you really need to have a certain ability to protect those who need protection, just in case. In case I am still as weak as I am now, so what should I do now? He may be able to ignore other people, but what about your classmates? Where's your teacher? Even though it is only a short period of time. He also has a bond with other military academies. He is a traverser, but he also has feelings. The environment of the military is the best way to cultivate feelings. Then, he spoke. I laughed more freely and freely, but in my mind I recalled scenes from the past. That originally very familiar picture, the picture of life on Earth, has become unfamiliar and distant without knowing it. And everything in front of me quickly became extremely clear and real. Ms. Zephyr, let me tell you a few heartfelt words. I come from a very far away place, my hometown is very peaceful and free. Even if you don't have the slightest strength, or even just an ordinary person who can't help but feel weak, you can live a life that doesn't have to worry about dressing or drinking. I used to be, in the words of the army, I was a waste of eating and waiting to die. I can lie still on the sofa all day and let others give me drinks and food. I have never been on a boat in my entire life, and I have never seen the sea with my own eyes. I have never seen the magnificence of the sky, let alone the suffering in the world. If there are no accidents, I will live in such a comfortable and mediocre way, and finally die. Perhaps in the end I can still ask a wife who doesn't care about whether I have money or a house. She doesn't need to be beautiful, she just needs to be good enough for me. If you can give birth to a big white fat man, and raise him safely until he grows up, it will be perfect. And when I die, maybe a few old friends shed a few tears at my funeral, and then bid farewell completely and never see you again. That's really an ordinary life. As the voice slowly spoke, Roy could feel the big hand holding his throat gradually loosening. I used to think that grades are not important at all. They can only represent the achievements of the student days. Later, I discovered that the achievements of people can actually be seen clearly from the beginning. Effort and self-discipline are a kind of habit, which will run through a person's life. I may be self-discipline or self-abuse, but it doesn't matter at all. The important thing is that I deeply understand a very simple truth. I may not be able to stand at that height 10 years later, but at least. Roy's tired eyes gradually bloomed with incomparably firm light. My current attitude determines whether I am 10 years from now, a waste that needs protection, or a character who can protect others. Hard work, self-discipline, desperate, is it really useful? Can you really beat talent? Roy didn't know. Zephyr didn't know either, nobody knows. But better than doing nothing, right? Zephyr stared at Roy, who was resolute in front of him, suddenly released his hand and sighed long. So you decided? Even in a way that is almost abusive to yourself, you have to become stronger? Even if you end up with injuries or even death, you will not hesitate. Roy smiled and nodded. Yes, actually, there are not many reasons, Teacher Zephyr. If you have to find a reason, that is I want to have a confident answer to the next question. He looked intently at Zephyr. If my life ends here, I have no regrets? If your life ends here, do you have no regrets anymore? For many people, this may be a problem that has never been thought of. Many people are immersed in the so-called happiness, easy, and happiness in the present and in front of them, and they have never thought of such a problem at all. Including Roy himself before the crossing, as well. But if death is about to come, when you know exactly how many days are left in your remaining life, I believe that anyone will put down the mobile phone in his hand. Leaving that comfortable sofa chair, do something that you always thought was too late, but you never actually did it. The essence of self-discipline is to kill that decadent self. Unambiguously, this requires great courage. If it weren't for the existence of this damn system, Roy estimated that he did not have the courage and perseverance to make changes. He has also questioned more than once whether he can do it. Can you achieve the level required by the system? But whenever he started to question, the system will always remind him of a very simple truth. You don't need to ask if you can do it, it is always difficult at first. First pretend you are okay, and then, slowly, you are okay. The system says so. This may involve deep psychological implications, but this is enough for Roy. No more regrets. Zephyr was stunned when he heard Roy's words. His figure staggered, and he involuntarily stepped back 2 steps, and his old eyes were in a trance for a while. Looking at the determined young face in front of him, he knew that he would never be able to dissuade him anymore. Because I was so stubborn, and almost pathologically trying to become stronger. This is really an excellent question, brat. At a certain moment, the corners of Zephyr's mouth slowly curled up, and a meaningful and melancholy smile appeared. Ms. Zephyr, do you have any regrets? Roy sighed in his heart and asked. Zephyr was stunned. Sorry? Of course there is. How could it not? He took a deep breath. Boy, I have many, many regrets in my life. He smiled heartily. Unfortunately, I was not able to personally arrest Roger, that bastard. It's a pity that I haven't been able to protect my wife and son. Unfortunately, I never really competed with Garp and Sengoku. I regret not being able to save more people in this terrible era. Roy was startled. The tragic life of Zephyr flashed through his mind. Joined the army when he was young, the dream of a hero. Master of 6 forms, the title of Black Arm. The glory of Admiral, the happiness of marriage. The joy of giving birth, the pinnacle of life. The tragic death of his wife and children, the smoke of war. Sadly lost, Admiral's retirement, enthusiastic about teaching and educating people. The storm of the training ship, the pirates who came. A deck full of blood and corpses, he was the only one left in the wind and rain, covering his broken arm and crying. The last craziness, the black battle flag rises from the ruins. The battlefield of bullets, the decisive battle between master and apprentice. Surrounded, and the lone grave that finally stood on a desert island in New World. The vivid pictures flashed past Roy's mind as if looking at the flowers, and finally gathered into the middle-aged man who seemed to be late. Roy's eyes can't help but droop, but Zephyr didn't notice Roy's strangeness, just smiled and continued. Isn't life like this? Full of regrets, but my old man, I really haven't regretted it. Have no regrets? Roy murmured. Yes, Zephyr laughed and nodded. Well, the old man has never regretted being a Marine. Don't always think that you are having a hard time. The old man has lived in this sea for decades and has seen the suffering in the world. Some people can't eat, some have lost their families because of pirates pillaging, and some even have their wives scattered and displaced because of the war. You should know about the old couple, right? Roy nodded, without speaking. Zephyr smiled disapprovingly. The old man lost his family, so he knows how painful it is. People say that pain can make people grow, but the King old man would rather not have this so-called growth. Zephyr scolded suddenly, his eyes flushed. These pains do not have to be experienced by many civilians in this sea. What is justice? Why do you work hard? Lousy don't care. Lousy just wants to protect the world. Guardian families living in peace and happiness in this world, and prevent them from experiencing the pain that the old man has endured. As long as the old man walks down this road, the old man will have no regrets. Zephyr's voice was deafening, blasting like thunder in the empty ward. A majestic and vast domineering aura rose slowly from his burly figure, and it was actually swaying the generous justice cloak behind him to fly freely and freely. Justice is dancing. Roy stared blankly. He had never seen or heard such words. On Earth, what almost everyone thinks in their minds, what they delve into. How to make money, buy a bigger house, change to a better car. Exercise a healthier body, find your own happiness. But, people with beliefs like Zephyr, he has never seen it before. But, you can't save everyone. Roy gritted his teeth. Zephyr grinned. What does this mean? One can save one, and one can save a family. What I can do, no one else can do it, so I have no shirk. Boy, you may not understand now, but I believe you will understand one day. Finished. Zephyr stretched out his big hand, patted Roy's shoulder hard, and said earnestly. If you want to become stronger, then take care of your injuries. Roy clenched his fists subconsciously. Become stronger. Chunin couldn't help but reappeared in his mind that the horror picture of Momosagi's sword splitting thousands of meters on the ground, and Chunin couldn't help showing a sense of depression in his heart. Can he really catch up with such a terrifying power? Will I be able to stand side by side with them one day? This extremely remote gap made Roy couldn't help but feel questioning. You can do it. Zephyr said suddenly. Roy was taken aback, then raised his head again. What caught my eye was the old face full of hope and expectation. Boy, be my student. Zephyr smiled proudly, his red eyes filled with undisguised appreciation for the boy in front of him. Do you know what is the most powerful force of man? It's not a powerful hockey, it's not a sharp and boundless knives, and it's not a devil fruit. It's the determination to go all out. He spoke word by word, categorically. I believe you. I believe you more than anyone else. Able to go to that position, no. Zephyr shook his head slightly. Able to go farther and higher than that position. If not, the old man will do everything he can to help you. Finished. Zephyr suddenly turned around and strode out of the ward door. Roy, who was left in the ward, sat blankly, motionless. Outside the ward. Zephyr closed the door gently and turned around. Oncoming is a bright sun, warm and full of hope. He couldn't help but squinted and smiled softly. Have you heard? By the door of the ward, a tall figure was standing with her head down, standing against the wall, her red lips tightly pressed, without a word. Zephyr turned his head, looked at that beautiful face, and smiled. Gion, you are a very gifted child. But because you are so talented, like Sakazuki, Paluzolino, and Kuzan, they don't understand the stubbornness of the brat who is lying in the hospital bed now. Momosagi raised his head, his eyes reddened and said. Ms. Zephyr, I'm sorry. Zephyr waved his hand and smiled. No, that brat is not so easy to get hit. On the contrary, you're full shot. Let him see the gap between the real strong, and also gave him a stronger motivation. Gion, you have to work hard, too. Otherwise, that crazy brat will catch up with you soon. Momosagi was stunned. Teacher Zephyr is really so confident in Roy? Admiral, you can't do it just by hard work and self-discipline. In the past few years, she didn't know how many young people who dreamed of Marine Admiral's dreams she had seen, working hard day and night to become stronger, but in the end they all failed. That kind of terrifying gap between talents is enough to easily destroy a person's will. Especially when you see, you can't practice the master's tricks day and night, in those geniuses, but you can perform it almost perfectly with just a glance. Listen to the meaning of Teacher Zephyr, he really has confidence in that boy. Just when Momosagi's mind was full of thoughts. If you want to go in and see him. I heard that you even hugged him in public on the school court. Zephyr suddenly smirked. Momosagi's pretty face flushed suddenly. Why did Teacher Zephyr know about this? It wasn't because she was shy, but because the Teacher Zephyr in front of her was her elder whom she highly respected. Being ridiculed by his parents, even if Momosagi's temperament is high and cold, his face can't stand it. Not going. Momosagi said angrily, and then hurried away. Seeing Momosagi's sloppy back, Zephyr laughed triumphantly. Young, so nice. For a moment, he shook his head, his eyes became determined again, and he took a step forward. With a deep gaze, he looked at the mansion of Marshal Marineford. It's time to find the empty old man. He took a step forward. Walking on the road leading to the Marshal's mansion, hope came like a light piercing the darkness. In the empty ward, it was cold. The air filled with the pungent smell of disinfectant was completely depressed and gloomy, as if to make people breathless. The ceiling fan above his head was still spinning unhurriedly, and the sloshing sound was very disturbing. Trust me so, old bastard. At a certain moment, Roy, who had been sitting still like a statue, suddenly smiled, chuckled and shook his head. You want to save me, but do you want to go and save yourself? He slowly raised his head, his movements were extremely stiff. But there was light in his eyes. Okay, since you have such confidence in me, how can I not disappoint you, right? At least, since I have come to this world, I won't let the tragedy in the plot happen to you again. He clenched his fists. Although he doesn't know exactly what Zephyr will use to help him become stronger, he has this heart, which is enough for Roy. No one treats others well for no reason, but Zephyr is an exception. Maybe he saw himself in Roy's body. I saw the passionate young man who had worked so hard, became stronger, and worked hard to barely show the world his brilliance under the radiance of the genius of the same period. But it really doesn't matter. For Roy, the truth of life is actually very simple. Who treats him well, he treats him well. System, come out, you can't continue to be so aggrieved. Roy's eyes flashed with confidence, and he said solemnly. Next moment, in his mind, the indifferent electronic sound of the system sounded like a natural sound. Congratulations on successfully completing the task, prove yourself, and the theme task, challenge yourself. Task, prove yourself. What can be called a self-disciplined soldier? That must be the first to take the lead and bravely face all crises. Thematic task, challenge yourself. Challenge Naval Headquarters Vice Admiral Momosagi Gion, hit any part of the opponent's body before losing. Reminder. The duel task has been completed, please get your reward. Reward extraction. Congratulations on your successful acquisition of a cultivation system that is infinitely suitable for you. 8 inner gates, revised. The moment the system's voice fell, the confident smile on Roy's face suddenly solidified, and the whole person was stiff and dumbfounded. Then, Roy's violent and furious low growl exploded in the ward. All F*K your uncle's system and get lousy out. Which system reward is this? 8 inner gates. Do you think you are funny? That's the forbidden technique of Naruto world. Let's not say that this is a forbidden technique of physical arts. Every time a door is opened, it will cause extremely terrifying damage to the body. The most important thing is that my damn thing is in pirate world. There is no Otsutsuki Kagaya, no sacred tree, and no chakra. How do you let me practice the 8 inner gates? Roy gritted his teeth, his eyes almost bursting with sparks. 8 Inner Gates is the forbidden technique from Naruto, developed by second Hokage Senju Tobirama, and was finally carried forward by Might Guy, known as the Guy King, and almost kicked out of the finale, crushing Uchiha Madara's coffin board firmly. The power of this forbidden technique cannot be said to be weak, but for Roy, who is in the pirate, it is a training system that is too tasteless. Because there is no sacred tree here, there is no source of chakra. This also means that Roy has no way to practice this powerful forbidden technique. At this time, the unhurried beating sound of the system sounded again. Excuse me. Please go through the program before starting the spray, and read the introduction of this exercise clearly. If you are still not satisfied after reading it, there is no way, this is the best practice method for you. Once the goods are shipped, they will not be returned, thank you. Roy was taken aback, trying to suppress the anger in his heart, forced himself to calm down, and immersed himself in this 8 Inner Gates introduction. 8 Inner Gates, revised, forbidden technique from the Naruto world, temporarily gains strong power by unlocking the channel that binds chakra in the human body. When the 8th gate is fully open, it is also called 8 Inner Gates formation. You can instantly gain dozens of times the power above the 5 shadows, but the power of the 8 Inner Gates depends on the caster himself, and the caster's own power increases exponentially, so different people can start the 8 Inner Gates. The power is also different. Opening the 8th gate after the death gate, you will die because of your own vitality burned out. Hint 1. This forbidden technique has been systematically and powerfully improved. Instead of using chakra, you can use the energy in the human body, similar to Haki's energy, for practice. Hint 2. The sequelae after opening the 8th gate vary from person to person. The stronger your physical fitness and the stronger your resilience, the lower the sequelae. Blessing. Work hard, young man. This is youth. This blessing. Why does it sound like a secondary 2? Several black lines appeared on Roy's head, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. The system naturally heard his inner complaint, Kaido. What's wrong with secondary 2? Secondary 2 is also a kind of youth, so you should cherish it. Compared to these okay things, shouldn't you dig into this forbidden technique cultivation method? Roy curled his mouth and quarreled with the system. There was no end to it. This bastard could know his introverted thoughts. But the system is right at all. Let's study the cultivation method of the 8 Inner Gates first. Since this is a self-made training system that systematically designates names, surnames, and surnames for oneself, there is probably something else. Although the system often uses various methods to torture itself, it is even more annoyingly called self-discipline. But Roy believes that in such a critical place, the system will not lose the chain. Bar? So he resisted the discomfort and pain from the muscles in his body, took a deep breath, calmed down and immersed all his mind in the explanation of the 8 Inner Gates. 8 Inner Gates. This is a move to lift the body's energy limit and let the excess energy release. In the meridian system of the body's energy flow, the places that inhibit and control the energy in the body are the 8th gate of opening the door, resting the door, the life door, the wounding door, the Duman, the Jingmun, the shocking door, and the dead door. This 8th gate will set a limit on the energy in the body, but this technique can force the energy to exceed this limit, thereby eliciting its own strength that is dozens of times stronger. Watching the introduction of 8 Inner Gates quietly, Roy smiled and frowned from time to time. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes and said solemnly, "System, this doesn't seem right. What is the human energy required by the 8 Inner Gates?" According to his understanding of the Naruto story, the source of energy released by 8 Inner Gates is the chakras circulating in the human body. More specifically, 8 Inner Gates actually uses chakra to stimulate the human body to exceed the limit of the human body, reaching several times or even dozens of times the original combat power. But here is Roy without chakra, how can he practice? The systematic answer is as reliable as ever. There is energy in the human body, it's just a matter of more and less. Just like the Haki cultivation system on this sea, Haki is also a way of energy expression to some extent. Chakra is also a kind of energy. The cultivation of 8 Inner Gates, in the final analysis, the most important thing is to stimulate the limit of the human body and reach the exponential expansion of combat power. Roy suddenly realized that it was fine, at least logically. Only, he frowned suddenly, and many more. It seems something is wrong. System. What's wrong? Roy angered. Why shouldn't the reward of this system be a powerful body filling? I felt a burst of refreshment, and then countless dirt came out of my body, and if I was stinking, I went to take a shower and then came out comfortably. Improve strength? People can be invincible by standing still. System. Oh, you still want to enema. Why don't you enema? You have read a lot of online novels, right? Why can an ordinary person with an ordinary body be able to reincarnate and become a super strong overnight? You have seen the Admiral level master, and you have also seen how far away you are from the powerhouse of that level. If I instill that level of energy into your body, it is estimated that in an instant you will explode on the spot, and there will be no scum left. You still need to be hard on yourself, young man. Don't think too much. If you don't work hard enough to hone your physique and will, don't talk about filling, even if it is a real enema, you are useless. Roy. This system is quite reasonable. Wrong. Roy reacted again. Why is the last sentence so wrong? So this is just a cultivation method, in the end, I still have to practice it by myself? He's stunned. The system takes it for granted. That's natural, this system is a self-discipline system, not a reward system. Giving you exercises and supervising your training is the best way to become stronger. If you have a reward, it's almost the same, don't be foolish. Roy was crying immediately. It doesn't take long. My own hell-style self-discipline training is about to start again. The system slowly said at this time, don't be too sad, boy. The advantage of 8 inner gates is that it allows you to overcome the barriers of talent and reach the threshold of combat power you want in the fastest time. As long as you work hard enough, Admiral rank, but you overcome the barriers of talent and reach Admiral level combat power. With the system, Roy fell into a deep silence. He knew that what the system said was not wrong. Admiral level combat power has a great relationship with talent. As far as his familiarity with the plot is concerned, the strong men on this sea who can reach the Admiral level are all talented. There are monsters, such as Akainu, Kizaru, and Aokiji, that shock the world in marine. Among the pirates is also Big Mom Charlotte Linlin, a freak known as a natural saboteur, who can destroy a giant village at the age of 8. Even Zephyr himself, whose talent was not dazzling in the last era, is quite good in physical skills, but he is not as amazing as Garp and Sengoku, otherwise he would not get the title of Black Arm. Roy knows his shortcomings better than anyone. That is talent. His talent is too ordinary. Changing to other slightly more general geniuses, under the systematic self-discipline training blessing, infinitely challenging the limits of his body, the progress he obtained is definitely much higher than the current Roy. Every time he thinks about this, Roy can't help but feel frustrated. But then I thought about it, before he crossed, he was a waste that couldn't even run 2 kilometers, but now he has surpassed the limit of ordinary humans, which may be enough to be praised. 8 inner gates. Roy quietly watched the training method given by the system, and a confident smile gradually appeared at the corner of his mouth. Limits, obstacles, rules, isn't it what makes people break? Talent? I don't believe it anymore. Roy has made up his mind here, but at the same time on the other side, the Marshal's mansion of Naval Headquarters Marineford ushered in a rare visitor. Marshal Marine's office. The current Marine Marshal Kong is burying his head in processing the mountain of documents in front of him. There was a steady knock on the door suddenly outside the gate. Tuck tuck tuck, Kong frowned, put down the file in his hand, rubbed his temple subconsciously, and asked slowly. Who is it? The guard came from outside the door to answer respectfully. Report to Marshal Empty, Zephyr Admiral is here, saying that he wants to see you. Kong looked at him. Zephyr is coming? This is rare. Just when he wanted to speak again, Zephyr's loud voice came from outside the door. Keep out of the way to the old man. What's the matter? Do you have to stop the old man to see the Marshal? Old man Kong, I'm here to visit you. A wry smile appeared on Sora's face. This guy is still the same as always, he said loudly. Let him in, otherwise, this guy will tear down the Marshal's office. Next moment, the heavy office door was slammed open. Zephyr strode in, carrying a pot of spirits in his hand. Sora saw this scene and said helplessly, Zephyr, it's office hours now, isn't it appropriate to drink alcohol? Zephyr smiled, but didn't say a word. He just thumped the half-high pot of spirits in his hand on the floor, and then gave him a look. Sora hurriedly waved his hand and said, No, drinking during office hours is always not good. As he said, he raised his hand and gestured to the guard. The guard nodded and walked away, closing the door by the way. Boom. After the door is closed, Zephyr grinned at Kong. It's okay now. Marshal Kong, who was originally serious and upright, moved his nose and suddenly laughed. Why are you still stunned? Hurry up and fill the old man. Before he finished speaking, he emptied the thermos cup with wolfberry in front of him, and slammed it heavily on the desk, his eyes flushed feverishly. Zephyr smiled, he knew that this old guy was addicted to alcohol. Guru, the sound of pouring wine slowly sounded, and the whole Marshal's office was suddenly filled with a strong aroma of wine. As soon as the wine was full, I couldn't wait to pick up the thermos cup and pour my head up. What? He let out a long sigh of enjoyment, his eyes were full of scarlet wine, and he smiled happily. It's your kid who understands me. This wine is not bad, probably the strong bar in South Blue. Zephyr also poured himself a glass, and after taking a sip, he quietly lowered his voice. Well, South Blue aristocratic wine. Last year, a gilded student who came to the military academy was a rich second generation. He gave me a lot. Sora's expression immediately became severe. Zephyr, bold. As the chief instructor of the military academy, dare to fill his pockets? This is your persistence as a soldier. He actually yelled at Zephyr unceremoniously. Zephyr leisurely said, I still have a few pots in my house. The empty words change. This kind of thing must not happen again in the future. In order to show punishment, I will personally collect the rest. Outside, the guards were stunned and stared at each other, and then they all pretended to hear nothing.